I guess the one thing I guess the important fact you omitted from my introduction is that I worked in banking for 20 years, so I have some clue as to what people might be thinking. So I suppose the one word that springs out at me from everything we've talked about is the word uncertainty. And if you're sitting on the 31st floor of a tower block in Canary Wharf and you're presented with a situation where a client may or may not be doing something which may or may not be legal in the context of various different laws which may or may not be compatible, then that uncertainty leads to one generally very simple risk management decision, which is no. And so the result of the uncertainty that comes out of this collision of legislation, before you even start thinking about what might be going on the ground and that you don't really understand because you're sitting in an ivory tower in E14, is that it's very difficult to make a positive decision. And that all feeds into terms which we've heard a lot about certainly in the press in the UK and indeed globally over the last, so say, 2 or 3 years, which is this whole concept of de-risking and risk appetite. So banks are looking for opportunities to de-risk, not just in this sector, but whether it's in trade finance, all sorts of areas where they feel that business is too expensive. But in this particular area, there's one critical factor to bear in mind. And that is that the upside, frankly, of banking the NGO community, it might make you feel good about yourself that you're supporting the sector, but actually from a financial perspective, and it's a dirty consideration, particularly for a room like this, but the financial consideration, the return that you make on banking that client sector is extremely limited. You are not a profitable client sector. The downside, potentially, and if you look at the fines that have been levied on banks and so on, and by the way, for things that they should not have done, so I'm not an apologist for the sector at all, but the downside can run to 7, 8, 9, 10 figures in billions of dollars. So that's what we call in the financial sector an asymmetric risk. Not much upside and almost unquantifiable downside potentially. Now you may think that that's not the view that should be taken, but frankly, that's much of the feedback that the sector might give you. But at the same time, the sector will provide banking services to NGOs. So what do the NGOs, the internationally operating NGOs, humanitarian NGOs, what do they display, the ones that are successful, what do they display that perhaps others don't? And I would say the most critical point is engagement with the banking sector. Too many NGOs operate their bank account in the same way as we as individuals operate our bank accounts. They open the account when they're 16, and they basically forget about it until there's either a problem, until there's a reason to go and chat. And I think what distinguishes the NGOs that I've talked to is that there are those that actively engage with their bank. They invite them to events. They brief them on the programs they're running. They try and explain to them what risks, how they're managing the risks that they face. So it's unsurprising that those that don't engage with their bank account, when things become difficult, so they want to move money into Syria and so on, there's an individual on the 31st floor in Canary Wharf trying to argue why that should be allowed to happen, and the 12 people around the table say, well, so what has the NGO told you about this situation? Well, not a lot really. So how can they possibly advocate for you if you don't engage with them? So the uncertainty, as I say, that we're discussing, has moved the banking sector to a situation where, on balance, the business is not necessarily worth doing.